Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to tonight's Empower Hour. My name is Mary Pettigrew, and I'm part of the Empower Our Future Communications team. We have a fantastic program tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge, with respect, as non-native people, that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded the land throughout generations. We also recognize that our government, academic, and cultural institutions and our nation itself were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle ongoing legacies of settler colonialism, oppression, and inequities, and to recognize the hundreds of Indigenous nations who continue to resist, live, create, and uphold their sacred relations across their lands. Moving on, I want to mention a bit of a change in tonight's agenda. We had really hoped to hear from Representative Amabile about the tentative CCE legislation here in Colorado. And we had also hoped to hear from former Representative Edie Hooten, who was one of the original champions of CCE for Colorado. Unfortunately, both of them are unable to be here tonight. And it's possible that Representative Kyle Brown will join us. Getting started, I want to go ahead and introduce our two guests. We are joined by Allison Elliott and Cody Hooven. Allison is the Executive Director of LEAN, the Local Energy Aggregation Network. Their mission is to support the expansion of clean energy CCAs, and they do that through initiatives and activities that are both responsive and proactive. In the decade that she has worked with LEAN, Allison has worked closely with LEAN's leadership and partners in assisting in launching several California CCAs, and has developed a strong understanding of the energy sector and CCA history and politics across the U.S. She's responsible for LEAN's operational functions, as well as developing and nurturing LEAN's relationships with the industry and communities. It's probably worth noting here too that community choice energy, or CCE, is what we will call it here in Colorado. It is referred to as community choice aggregation, I believe, and of course Allison will correct me if I'm wrong, in California. So they call it CCA, but essentially it is the same animal. Cody Hooven is the founder and CEO of Lupa Affairs, a woman-owned, people-first firm serving government, private sector, and nonprofit clients that are changing the world. Lupa Affairs provides strategic advice and guidance for forward-looking initiatives related to climate change, clean energy, and social justice. Cody has over 15 years experience advancing groundbreaking and equitable progress in communities. Her successes include leading the development of the first ever port climate action plan, and secured support from waterfront businesses that generate $6 billion with a B in economic impact, and garnering unprecedented support, which led to the passage and implementation of a nationally recognized climate plan for the city of San Diego, which happens to be the 8th largest city in the United States, and building the 2nd largest public power agency in California with $700 million in revenue. So with that, I want to thank Cody and Allison for being here and turn it over to them.
Great, thank you so much for inviting me today. I think I will share my slides here. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to your Power Hour. As I was introduced, my name's Allison Elliott, and I am the Executive Director at Lean Energy US. We're a national 501c3 nonprofit organization that was formed in 2011. We work on a national, state, and local level to encourage and empower communities to purchase and invest in competitive renewable power, leveraging community choice energy. And by the way, yes, in California, we do call it CCA. So if I slip up, you'll know CCA and CCE are the same thing. I'll be going over a few basics of CCE, a national overview of CCE programs across the country, and 3 major benefits of CCE programs. That would be price stability, increased renewable energy, and investment in local programs. A quick review for those who may not be too familiar. What is community choice energy? Community choice energy allows local governments to pool or aggregate their electricity load in order to purchase or develop power on behalf of their residents and businesses and municipal accounts. Established by law in 10 states thus far, CCE is an energy supply model that works in partnership with the region's existing utility, which continues to deliver power, maintain the grid, provide consolidated billing, and other useful customer services. If you were a CCE customer, you might notice a change on your utility bill. Notably, the electric delivery charges and electric generation charges are split into 2 lines, as you can see here. This is not an extra charge. It simply shows that your CCE is procuring energy for you now, not the utility. Nationally, there are 10 states with CCE enabling legislation, with Rhode Island and New Hampshire launching their first programs earlier this year. As of June 2023, we estimate there are about 1,200 communities across the US with active CCE programs, which equates to over 27.5 million people, or over 10 million households. The larger CCA states is Ohio, with 41% of the population participating in a program, followed by 31% in Massachusetts, 38% in California. There are many benefits to CCE programs. One of the most important is price competitiveness and stability. This slide is a little busy, but here you see a few graphs showing utility versus CCE rates in various states based on a study Lean conducted and released in the late spring of this year. The red lines represent CCE default pricing. You can see clearly from all 4 of these states that CCE prices save customers money most of the time, but also provide stable rates, avoiding unpredictable seasonal rate changes from the incumbent utility, which you see on the blue line. CCE programs in the states shown here are often focused on pricing lower than the utility. However, over the past several years, CCE programs in these states have begun to offer default and opt-up products with higher renewable energy content and are managing to keep them cost competitive. You can see this particularly in Massachusetts and New York here, the yellow line. This slide shows a few highlights from programs in Ohio, New York, Massachusetts, and California, which demonstrates a CCE's ability to save their customers money, protect them from utility price fluctuations, and increase the amount of renewable energy in their energy mix offering. Last year, SOPEC, a CCE that serves 20 communities in Ohio, was able to offer all of their customers 100% renewable energy for less than the utility standard mix. Joule Community Power in New York has saved their customers tens of millions of dollars since its launch in 2019 and last winter Mass Power Choice in Massachusetts was able to protect their customers from significant price spikes from the utility. That was last winter, sorry. CCEs in California have always focused on the rapid transition to highly renewable and greenhouse gas-free sources of electricity generation while keeping rates at or below what the utilities charged. Just announced last month, for example, California's first CCE to launch, MCE, announced its standard 60% renewable light green energy service, which is their default, is more than 95% greenhouse gas-free, 1 year earlier than planned, and 18 years ahead of California's clean electricity target. Quite impressive. CCEs has the ability to, upon program launch, instantly provide a higher mix of clean electricity to a large number of customers that would normally use a standard product offering with their default utility, which often meets only minimal state requirements. For example, 80 to 90% of New York State residents living in a CCE community program power their homes with clean energy, as opposed to 1 to 5% in areas without a CCE program. CCE programs provide a default electricity offering in which a customer is automatically enrolled, often with higher renewable energy content than the default utilities standard offering. A large majority of CCE programs also include opt-up energy mix offerings with even more renewable energy content, some with 100% renewable and 100% local renewable options. The graph shown on this slide is from 2020, but it very effectively shows CCE renewable energy offerings for several states. As of 2020, the states of California, Illinois, and New York have between 75 and 100% of CCE programs with default or optional 100% renewable energy offerings. Massachusetts and Ohio had approximately 30% of their CCE programs with a default 100% renewable offering. I can tell you these numbers have gone up certainly in the past few years. Given the high percentage of renewable components in CCE energy product offerings, communities are also able to decrease their level of CO2 emissions from what would have been produced using the default utility standard energy products. Developing the U.S. voluntary renewable market, another benefit. According to a National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL study sponsored by the U.S. Department of Energy in 2022, 4.8 million customers procured about 12.8 million megawatt hours of voluntary green power through CCE in 2021. This means that 60% of the total U.S. voluntary green power market customers were CCE customers in 2021, while at the same time, CCEs represent less than 10% of the nation's households. Finally, I'll cover one more benefit of CCE before handing it off to Cody. Because CCEs are community-led programs, their profits are invested back into the communities they serve. For California, I've mentioned a few programs here on this slide. AVA Community Energy, which is based in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, their energy resilient critical municipal facilities program keeps the lights on during power outages events at critical facilities. RCEA, which is located on the north coast of California, their airport microgrid helps keep the power flowing at some of the more remote areas in their service territory, including a U.S. Coast Guard station. Peninsula Clean Energy's EV Ready program is working to install EV chargers at commercial buildings, apartment complexes, and other public locations. San Diego Community Power's Solar for Our Communities programs are increasing local solar projects in disadvantaged communities. And as a final example, and there are many, I could go on for hours, I had to pick and choose here. 3CE's Ag Electrification program provides significant rebates to agricultural customers for electrifying farm equipment. All right, now without further ado, I'll hand the baton over to Cody Hooven, who will be discussing a CCE case study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you everybody for being here and inviting me to speak. I'm excited to share a little bit more in detail with you about community choice energy and how to get it off the ground, having done it myself. So just a little bit more background on me and my experience, in addition to the lengthy bio that was read about me. It's always a little awkward to listen to that. I was the lead person who stood up San Diego Community Power, which is a CCE program in California. So it's now the second largest public power agency in California. I learned a ton about how to work with cities to get them to agree to this and to get it off the ground. Everything from operational startup measures to financing. All the challenges that along the way that I heard of, this is impossible, it's impossible to fund, we don't have money, we don't have support, et cetera, et cetera. I've been through all of those discussions and battles, and happy to report San Diego Community Power is now an over $1 billion in revenue agency, generating quite a decent surplus revenues that are getting invested back into regional communities that they serve. So I'll talk more about that, and have now gone off my own and want to help others do big things. I'd like to acknowledge that this is a California-based case study, and you know, I encourage you to learn from us, the good things and the bad, and improve upon the models that you see out there. So with that, I'll just dive in a little bit. I intend to be a little bit more conversational and hope that a few minutes of speaking will give you some ideas for questions, and we can have a little bit of a discussion. So the first step to forming, excuse me, a community choice program, CCE or CCA as it's often called, is really you need enabling legislation. So community choice is all about choice. It's right in the name. Right now, if you have an investor-owned utility, and that's it, which many places in the country do, you don't have a choice. That is your provider of electricity and gas or whatever services you receive, as well as transmission and distribution. And it's a regulated monopoly, so you don't have choice. So the first step to enabling legislation is really just opening up choice for customers. It's not forcing a decision on them. It is opening up opportunity for local jurisdictions, cities and counties, to make that decision based on their own community needs. And everybody likes choice. So that's the first step. Even if legislation is passed, which we're hopeful in Colorado that we see you all with all your other progressive and forward-looking initiatives, that this does also move forward for you. There's still local decisions that need to be made. So again, there's still off-ramps, stage gates, and plenty of opportunity to have further discussion. Legislation shouldn't be as scary as it is. It's only scary to those who want to make sure nothing changes. Once, let's follow that thought process along. Let's say you do now have enabling legislation in your state that allows CCEs to be formed. The local level, this is really where communities now have a voice in deciding what they want their programs to look like, and whether it's an individual city or county, or whether it's a group of cities that come together, or cities and counties, whatever blend that looks like. They can come together and create a business plan of sorts to say, okay, what is this going to look like for us? How are we going to serve our community? What do we want to see implemented here? And then they form that at the local level. It's typically done through an ordinance or a series of ordinances if there's multiple agencies coming together. And then there is now a local CCE formed. Then you begin the onslaught of startup processes. Prior to that, you're doing a whole series of community engagement, and one of the many lessons learned I can share with you all and encourage any community that's looking at this is to bring your community along. Advocates are going to be very supportive of the legislators that are taking sometimes what they feel is a risky vote and even supporting this initiative at the legislation level down to the local level. So being vocal and supporting from that standpoint, and also encouraging your communities and your community-based organizations to have a voice in how they want this to look. Is you're all going to have different motives for pursuing this, whether it's clean energy and climate action, whether it's cost competition, which is when the consumer always wins, whether it's local resilience and rebuilding better when wildfires and other climate crises occur. There could be a slew of reasons why you move forward with this decision, but I'd encourage you to really have those discussions with your communities and encourage them to be supportive along the way. A lot of what we did in San Diego was the reasons for us were competition and price. We have some of the highest rates in the country for energy. We wanted to see some competition infused there. We don't always promise lower rates because sometimes for the same price, you're getting a much cleaner energy supply. So you're getting a higher value product, so to speak, for the same price. And that's, I think, a really important distinction for those of us that are looking at climate action. There's an economic driver as well. It creates local jobs when you're building projects more locally and you have control over that. There's a lot of reasons why, so I encourage you to really think about that. Startup financing, that's a big deterrent to local governments who don't have a lot of money, are fearful of starting a brand new agency. And it's not as overwhelming or as intimidating as one would think. There is actually banks out there that see energy as a hugely successful and safe investment. And when we put out to bid, when we solicited proposals for startup financing, I had several really fantastic offers from the JP Morgan Chases of the world. We actually went with a bank in Sacramento that offered the best rates and the best pricing and also had a lot of experience in clean energy. But there's a lot of opportunity out there because they see the value in this. So the initial startup funding, really, if it comes from the city or municipal level, it's committed to be repaid once the CCE is up and running. And then as soon as you get a little bit of initial financing, you can get the rest through a bank because they see people pay their energy bills. It's a safe bet for banks to fund these types of initiatives. I could talk all day about getting financing. We spent a lot of time on that. The next step is really now bringing on experts. I worked in local government for many years. I like to think of myself a little bit entrepreneurial despite that. Never quite fit into the government model. And really my first step as a leader of an organization is to think about who are the experts I need and the smartest people at the table. And that's initially what I did, is you bring on the experts. You'll hear a lot about you don't have expertise in power portfolio management or all the things that you think you need. And there's experts out there that you can bring on board to help you. Different CCEs have different models, but there's consultants that you could start with, and then you can bring staff in-house at whatever scale you'd like to see that at. But bringing on those experts immediately in the financial space and the energy procurement space and regulatory is critical. Again, feasible and plenty of experts out there that are really willing to work in a new space. You're essentially opening up a new opportunity in a otherwise highly regulated in a monopoly structure, so it doesn't have a lot of room for flexibility. People will come out of the woodwork to be able to work in a space that allows for more innovation and creativity and flexibility and more community-driven planning and design. It's a pretty fun industry to be in, actually. There's a lot of risks. You'll hear about this a lot. What are the risks? And I encourage you to look at them. There's a lot of risks and there's mitigations that go along with each risk. And one of the things that I'll say, we heard a lot about, it's a risky industry. You shouldn't be getting into it. It's too scary. The risks that a CCE will face are no different than the risks that investor-owned utilities currently face. And there's a series of mitigations. If you do a serious study and you hire experts and you take this as a very serious opportunity, the power markets are dynamic. You're entering a traded commodity market. And that's the same market that investor-owned utilities and others are operating in. Again, not a new risk, and there's mitigations out there that to address those. You will have a relationship with the utility. Many people like to pit these as arch enemies against each other. But you have a long-standing relationship that you're signing up for with your investor-owned utilities. And at least in California, those investor-owned utilities don't make a profit off of selling power. They make it off of transmission and distribution. So that partnership remains. Their profits should remain. It shouldn't be a threat to them. And if it is, it's worth a deeper conversation of why they may perceive that to be. There's a lot of other, I feel like I've been going on for a while, there's a lot of other detailed things to consider, but engaging our community and managing those PR risks, that's initially, any new policy initiative comes with those types of risks. So I'd encourage you to think creatively, tap into others. This world of CCE is incredibly sharing and collaborative. And there's lots of resources out there for sharing lessons learned, best practices. Another one we hear a lot about is unions and how they perceive this issue. And again, there's a lot of concerns, and bringing them along on the journey as well, just like your community, is the best way to really build support for this initiative. Fast forward, California is, at least half of California is now served by CCEs, and they're cropping up all over the country, and communities are really benefiting. So there's plenty of opportunities. Allison touched on some. Once you get a stable structure up and running and operating, within several years, if it's well run, you can see investments that go right back into the community. And that's because any excess revenues, which are typically called profits in the business world, are not going to shareholders. They're not going to make a profit because this is now a public type structure. So any excess revenue has to be invested back into the organization and the communities that they serve. So we're seeing just so many creative programs around everything from support for California, as Colorado has a lot of wildfires. And we're seeing a lot of creative investments in helping homes and families rebuild with an all-electric home, with a lot of other creative opportunities. We're seeing investments in everything from electric vehicles, really tapping into what the communities actually are interested in, and then investing back into those programs. I'm going to stop there because I could go on for days about the benefits, and would love to open this up to questions or any sort of dialogue. And also, I understand we have a Representative Brown here, and would love to hear from him as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Cody and Allison. And yes, before we take questions, Representative Brown, if you are ready to go, we'd love to hear your local perspective. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you, and thanks to Cody and the other presenters tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all. So I'll say that Representative Amabile and I have been working on this, and she really wishes that she could be here tonight. So unfortunately, you get me instead of her and me, I guess. But I'm happy to give you sort of an update on where we are in terms of the legislation. We've been working very closely with our local community advocates, and our former state representative who ran the original bill, Cody Hooven, who ran the bill to study this issue and how it might be applied in Colorado. And so, from our perspective, this seems like a really great thing that our communities could really benefit from. I represent sort of southeastern Boulder County. Representative Amabile represents part of Boulder and an additional swath of counties that are sort of central and north. And that giving communities like ours the ability to form CCEs and to choose the kind of resources and power, energy that they're getting is a real benefit. You know, my community in particular, I think, wants to move very, very quickly to decarbonize and to really achieve our climate goals on a much quicker timeline than maybe even the statewide goals of 2032 or 2040. And we think that we can be a leader as a community in showing other communities that this can be done. So, you know, we think it's very important for us. We are served by an investor-owned utility, and we don't have choice at this point. We would like to have choice. I think many people would. And so we've, you know, Representative Amabile and I have embarked on, with the help of folks on this call, Larry and Leslie and others, have embarked on drafting a bill. We've been working on it with them, and we've begun to socialize that initial draft with some key stakeholders. We've had conversations with the governor's office as well as the Colorado Energy Office. We've talked to the unions. I know Cody mentioned the unions earlier, but we've also had conversations with the renewable energy industry, particularly the solar industry, as well as AARP even, and some environmental groups. I would say that the reception has been skeptical at best. Especially, you know, our governor's office and our energy office have worked hard to set the state on a path towards decarbonization. They believe that they have created a system that are pushing investor-owned utilities like Xcel into the renewable energy space faster, and perhaps the fastest of any investor-owned utilities in the country. And so they are skeptical of sort of upsetting the apple cart at this point in time. I would say our conversations with the unions were also very challenging. As you all know, investor-owned utilities like Xcel are some of their biggest employers, and they're worried that while the distribution lines may stay with the utilities, they are worried that CCEs, which will be organized under municipalities, which don't necessarily need to utilize or allow for unionized labor in Colorado, could cost them good union jobs. The renewable energy industry is skeptical. They are concerned that there will be actually less renewable energy being bought. They look at California's experience as a good idea 20 years ago and aren't so sure that it's a good idea in Colorado right now. Groups like AARP that look out for seniors and sort of ratepayers are worried about those communities that get left behind, paying a disproportionate rate in terms of distribution or energy generation, having a disproportionate impact on their costs. And so they're worried about especially lower income residents and seniors paying higher rates. And then I would say that the environmental community so far, has in some cases been supportive, but in other cases has been skeptical. They have, I think, found it for whatever it's worth, they are on this path as well, along with the energy office, and are concerned about how it might upset the apple cart in terms of meeting our climate goals by 2030 or 2040. So, we have a lot more work to do. It's to make this a reality in Colorado. We've got a lot of very important, very powerful groups that are opposed for one reason or another. And in some cases, I would say the facts I would like to think that facts matter, but a lot of times at the Capitol they don't. Right? It's perception, and if the perception is that this is going to cost you union jobs, or there's going to be less solar energy that's bought or developed, or that ratepayers are going to pay more, then that's the reality, and that's what gets carried and communicated to other legislators. I think that's where we're at in Colorado right now. I'm interested in this. We've been working hard on this. Representative Amabile and I will have to continue to have conversations, but it's a very difficult path right now in Colorado. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity, not to be the bearer of bad news. Sorry about that, but I just appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you. Happy to take questions, and thanks again for the great presentations, Allison and Cody.
Thank you so much, Representative Brown. Appreciate your comments, although, yeah, that wasn't a great report. But we hope you will, among other things, be sure to not leave without telling us some things that you would recommend that citizens can do to let our legislators know that many of us want this. But yeah, you brought up a lot of things, and I'm sure Cody and Allison both want to respond to those. But Chris, over to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm Chris Hoffman with Empower Our Future. We have some questions actually related to what Representative Brown just brought up. And I can pitch these to both Allison and Cody. The first is just your advice. You said, Allison, you said that CCE is only scary for people who don't want that to happen. And it sounds like there's some people here who in the state who may not want it to happen, at least as their understanding is right now. So how best to swing the pendulum in the other direction, and how best to support legislators? Either of you.
Yeah, I think Cody, you'd be best to answer. You were on the front lines in San Diego, so go ahead.
I would also hand that question to Representative Brown. I mean, different areas need different types of support, and what pressures he's experiencing and others are, which he's definitely shared a few, are how you provide support. I will just say that I haven't heard a new argument yet. I'm working with different cities across the country on how to pursue CCE, and I have not heard a new argument yet for why it's going to cause the lights to go out or it's going to cause loss of union jobs. I haven't heard it yet, a new thing, and anywhere that has implemented those things, none of those scary outcomes have actually happened. And in fact, we see more investment in communities. We see more investment in renewable energy. We see the same, if not more, jobs because communities are demanding more cleaner energy, and that's just more build out. There's been a lot of negotiation, and I think that's my personal style for paths forward. If, for example, in our region, we had a lot of concerns about the unions losing jobs. They were really concerned about that, and so were a lot of our electeds. So we wrote into our own local ordinance and rules that we were sure to, one, not prevent union organizing should anybody pursue that, and two, to ensure that any build outs we do would have union jobs as part of that requirement. Is a pretty simple solution, but there's a lot of misinformation to overcome in order to get to those types of solutions, and just fear of change too.
That's really very reassuring to hear. Thank you, because you've been through it, you've seen it, you know it, and you can say no new arguments under the sun, and there are answers to everything, and it just means bringing people along. Did I hear somebody, Representative Brown, were you starting to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is definitely some of the concessions you were talking about, Cody. Not concessions, but the sort of stipulations are important to Representative Mobley and I, and we've definitely had conversations with the unions about, ensuring that these new entities can maybe have to utilize unionized labor. And I think there's still the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, right? And they've worked for decades to craft collective bargaining agreements with the investor-owned utilities. And it's certainly a heck of a lot easier to craft an agreement with one big entity than it is with lots of little ones. So for whatever reason, I think they remain skeptical even with that. But these conversations will continue. So.
One additional thought, especially while you're here, Representative Brown, I know that Colorado passed legislation requiring them to join an RTO by 2030, I believe. That's going to open up the door for a lot more renewable energy to come onto Colorado's grid. So this is coming. Clean energy is coming, and that need for unions to have to negotiate with others, this might be actually a safer pathway for them, is to do it in controlled CCE environments rather than kind of just wide open, an open wholesale market. So it's just something to think about.
Thank you.
That's great. And any other suggestions or advice for our representative from either of you that would be helpful to him and to Representative Amabile?
I think I heard Representative Brown mention having low income customers or fixed income customers being left behind, and ultimately paying higher rates to the utility because a bunch of their customers are leaving to join the CCA. And that actually does not happen. The CCE actually pays the utility what's called an exit fee, which is a fee that basically compensates the utility for their lost load. So communities that aren't part of a CCE but still part of the same utility are not going to see price increases from the utility. You have anything to add to that, Cody?
Yeah,
No, that's great. Go ahead, Representative.
Sure. I was just going to say that's definitely a component of the bill that we've been drafting. We'll keep having conversations and trying to make that point. I mean, I think it's a good one. It's a matter of whether or not it really lands.
So one issue that may be particularly important to us in Colorado, particularly here in the Front Range, is you mentioned that one of the utilities you talked about who was, and probably more, was developing resilience centers. And since a couple of years ago, we here experienced the trauma of the Marshall Fire, having resilience centers, places where people can go in case of some emergency, or the fire, the police, the emergency responders, all of those having secure sources of power, and also places, shelters for people to go, particularly as we're experiencing more and more climate-caused emergencies. Could you speak a little bit more about those products or those programs like the resilience centers that the CCEs in California have been working on?
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. They do, several come to mind. They would retrofit community centers or other central localized public places with microgrid or power that can be, if the grid goes down, if there's an emergency. So, and it can be served for anything. It can be a cooling room when there's a heat wave. It can be a staging place for firefighters and other first responders to collect themselves and go out. So yes, there's been a lot of that development. One in my backyard, Marine Clean Energy has one in our community as well. Cody, I'm not sure about San Diego or down south in California. Sure they do.
Yeah, no, I think there's tons of examples of ways that CCEs are investing in communities, being responsive to the community's needs. So I don't know, I could list a ton, so I won't list any really for now, but I'm happy to talk more about that. That I think the point is that these types of programs can be decided at the local level and fairly quickly once they're built up. It doesn't have to go through a state regulated, Public Utilities Commission process before it can be decided again at the local level. And it's so much more nimble, which is not something you often hear about government, but it's a much more nimble process and can be decided very quickly and really driven by the local community's needs and not interests of shareholders and state regulators.
That's another great argument in favor of CCE. I really appreciate that. One of the questions that I've been asked when I go out, have talked to friends and neighbors about CCE here, is they raise the questions, how does a community or city decide to join a CCE? And I think you mentioned an ordinance, but I think people would appreciate understanding a bit more about the process. And then related to that, the question is, can individual consumers opt out? And I understand they can, but maybe you could speak about that too.
Yeah, I don't know the details. So Representative Brown, I'm going to lean on you again for the legislation that you're drafting of the specific structure, but typically it's a local decision. So once the state enables, it's permissive at the state level, local jurisdictions can choose to form a CCE. Is that how yours is structured as well?
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
It is permissive, and it would allow local communities to form them if they thought it was in their best interest, right? There might be communities that would, or many communities even, that might decide, it's just easier and cheaper and whatever for us to go with our investor-owned utility, and that would be fine. But it would provide communities with the choice, and then the ability of individuals potentially to opt out is an important part of that as well.
Mm-hmm. So there's kind of choice at multiple levels. Yeah. And customers can opt out of the CCE program. Typically, they're defaulted into it because for a few reasons, it allows a critical mass of customers to get off the ground. People don't typically opt into things. So if you waited for that, it'd be a slow process. And also it's now an organization that is formed and led by elected officials who those communities have elected in theory. So it gives them the opportunity in an agency that's made up of people that they can vote in or out in theory, rather than a private corporation. We get that question a lot. Where are they defaulted in instead of out? And then just the choice at multiple levels. So it's a choice by the local communities to push for it. It's a choice by local government to enact a CCE program. And then it's the choice for the customer individually to opt back out if they choose and can move in and out as they see fit.
Yeah, and I think I also wanted to add that a lot of work goes into making sure the CCA program is feasible before it even launches. There's a lot of studies and what would our pricing be, and if it's not competitive with the utilities at any level, you just put it aside and revisit it another day. There's no requirement for you to, if it's enabled in the state, there's no requirement for any city to launch it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it also is, we get pushback even from, folks who are really focused on climate action by saying, well, then you'll just allow communities like Grand Junction or Weld County or, one of the less climate focused communities to just do nothing but oil and gas. And I said, well, I think we can put protections into the bill to prevent that. But in any case, it's these are the types of conversations that we have. It's a very it was a challenge even for my my colleague, former Rep. Hooten, to get just the study bill done so many years ago. So we're, it's definitely an uphill battle. But you all know that. I mean, California is no stranger to these fights, and it sounds like all of the things that I just said you've heard for the last gazillion years. So anyway,
I wish I heard
said,
something new.
nothing. I haven't heard anything new yet.
I look forward to it. Just for a new.
Also, that's nice and also disappointing, right?
Yeah.
That it's the same thing over and over again, right?
I'm waiting for a new a new one to try.
Yeah. And Colorado is not the only state trying to pass legislation right now. And so we're coming across these arguments
Over and
in
over.
different states as well. Yeah.
So speaking of the questions over and speaking of questions, we've got a number already in the Q&A. So bless you. First one, excellent presentation. Thank you. Colorado entities have expressed concern that CCE will make it difficult for solar providers because they won't know who they will sell their project to. How have solar developers reacted in California and other CCA states?
I could say from my experience, anytime I put out it's called an RFO, a request for offers for power, we had just so many responses. So I don't think there's any concern about who they're going to sell their power to. Maybe it's too many choices. And CCEs are new entities when they first enter the market. So, it's a financial and a business transaction. So sometimes larger solar providers are looking to them to say, are you really financially sound? Are you going to have credibility in a few years and a credit backing and those types of questions? But I haven't seen any concerns from solar providers. In fact, they're supportive because it's just more CCEs are tended to be formed in states that are pushing for higher renewable power, which is just driving more build of renewable energy.
Can I follow up on that question? Because one question I've also gotten is the solar incentives that we provide, that our investor-owned utility provides for a lot of renewable energy, solar panels, the like. There's some concern that you throw everything to CCEs, and there's no guarantee that these incentives that are helping to promote solar energy will still be there, or if they'll be as strong or whatever else. How have you all dealt with that in California?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Typically, the incentives that the investor-owned utilities are paying are, in California anyway, and I could dig into this for Colorado, are pulled out of funds that every ratepayer has paid into. So every ratepayer in the state pays into a pot of funds, and then those are distributed back through the utilities as incentives. And they're kind of mandated by the Public Utilities Commission. It's not that the investor-owned utilities are doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're actually funds that are collected and then redistributed just through them. So CCEs are doing something similar. They have access to those same sources of funds. So those are ratepayer customers, which now are shared amongst investor-owned utilities and CCEs. So they can tap into those same pots of funds to offer the same incentives. Or they are, so one example for rooftop solar in particular, most, if not all CCEs in California are saying, okay, whatever the investor-owned utility pays you for the excess energy you're producing off of your own rooftop solar, we'll pay you that plus a sweetener, an additional 1 cent per kilowatt hour or something. So it's actually a higher incentive.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question here is, entities in Colorado have raised concern that lower income communities will be left behind and will have to pay higher rates to the incumbent utility. Can you comment on this?
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier. That's not been the case in California. The CCAs in California pay the utility what's called an exit fee, which compensates the utility for the load that has left. So if you have two communities right next to each other, one is low income, one is more moderate, and that community decides to go CCE, you're not going to see a price increase from the utility in the low income community right next door that shares the same utility. The CCA or CCE compensates the utility for that for the exiting load.
Great. Thank you. Representative Brown, do you have any questions for our experts here?
No, I just want to copy your slides. I mean,
Okay.
let's see those.
I think we'd all like to see those.
And actually, the rate slides I thought were really helpful. But I think it's to me, it's again, the factual basis of this is important, but so is the politics, and so I have to. We have to manage both of those sides and see how we can find a path forward. So anyway.
Yeah, we did release a study earlier this year about CCE. That's where all those graphs and stuff come from.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that with you.
Yep.
So the next question here is, did California and other states with CCE or CCA see opposition from the local investor-owned utilities? And how would you characterize that opposition?
Well, yes, yes. I don't know one CC that didn't see opposition. In San Diego, actually in California, there is a law that prevents investor-owned utilities from using ratepayer dollars to lobby against CCEs and other things. And I believe Colorado may have passed that. Is that something similar?
We passed a bill last year that prevents that puts serious restrictions on how much they can use ratepayer dollars for lobbying.
Yeah, that's right.
Not specifically for CCE, but yeah.
Lobbying in general, yeah, and so I think that was kind of some of the impetus in California. The first CCE that was formed in California, starting back in 2010, PG&E used something like $40 million of shareholder money to lobby against CCE, and it's not CCE in particular that was the problem. It's that they're using ratepayer dollars to lobby against something that could be good for ratepayers. So that was kind of the principle of passing that legislation. So I'm happy to see that Colorado's at least walking that similar path. So since we passed that legislation in California, there was a loophole in it that said, however, if you form a separate marketing division and use shareholder funds, you could do whatever you want. So we were the beneficiaries of the first marketing division of a utility that lobbied directly against CCE in the San Diego region. It was frustrating because local governments and grassroots efforts are very poorly funded, as you all know as well, if not better than I do. And the investor-owned utilities are very well funded. So it's a struggle, but we had a lot of community support to overcome it was basically a misinformation campaign, and a lot of communities out there did a ton of work supporting their legislators and our local legislators, and with facts, with support, with whatever they needed to overcome that, and it worked. And I could put myself in investor-owned utility shoes and say I've been running the show for 100 years and I don't want to lose that that structure and that control, and I understand it, but we're in a new day and age, and new opportunities, and there's room for everybody, I think, at the table, and that eventually came through.
So we're close to the end of our official hour, but everybody please stay tuned because our panelists have agreed graciously to stick around for a little while to answer more questions, and we do have more questions and comments, but I'll just pass it over to Mary for a brief acknowledgement and a previews of coming attractions, and then we'll get right back to the panelists. Mary?
Great, thank you, Chris. And again, we want to thank Allison, Cody, and Representative Brown for being here. We really appreciate it. I want to take a moment to thank other members of the Empower Our Future communication team. This subset of the communication team are critical in terms of making these Empower Hours happen. I want to thank Paul Cullen, Chris Hoffman, Steve Whitaker, and Julie Zonizer. Again, a great team to work with, and we really appreciate your input about our events. We're always welcoming your thoughts about topics you want to hear about. I did also want to mention that on the CCE page of the Empower Our Future website, which is empowerourfuture.org/CCE, we do have the link to send, sorry, it's not a link, but it is the information. It's the email address and the phone number for the governor. We'd love you to send his office your comments regarding CCE. And if you'd like to see it here in Colorado, we're hoping that will be helpful. Also, as a follow-on to tonight, on this slide that you're seeing, those two events on the right-hand side might be of particular interest if you want to know more about CCE. Our very own Leslie Glustrom and Steve Whitaker explain CCE in depth in that top one on the right, and the Sonoma Clean Power is just, it's really cool to see what California CCA has been able to do as a result of being in this new power format. Sorry, that's of course not the way to say it, but being in a CCA instead of an investor-owned utility. I think that is all I need to say, except again that we have more questions, so I'm going to get out of the way. And again, thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah,
And,
thank you.
returning to Allison and Cody, and I don't know if Representative Brown is still available. He may have had to leave. So speaking, we do have one comment and then a couple more questions. One comment is sorry to hear the more sobering perspective at the legislature now, as Representative Brown outlined. I post to remind attendees that electric customers in the Black Hills Energy Service Territory are already pay about 50% more than Xcel electricity customers. The city of Canyon City is slowly exploring potential alternatives, but we have a long way to go. The city has budgeted for an independent analysis of the distribution system within city limits to be done in 2024. Perhaps those results will help push something forward. The 6 counties of the Black Hills Electric Service Territory have a high rate of poverty and yet pay the highest cost for electricity in the state. To date, I do not sense that the governor's office or the Colorado Energy Office are addressing this equity in any meaningful way. So just a comment from one of our listeners. Then we have a few more questions. What can presenters offer in advice for dealing with exit fees? You talked about exit fees. Either of you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, can you repeat the question? What can, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Presenters offer and advice. Okay.
Yeah, what can you offer in as advice for dealing with exit fees? Is what the question says.
Do it better than California has set that up. I think your legislation is contemplating that. Exit fees are, we've actually tried to work to reframe them as above market costs, because it's not simply an exit fee. It's really hard to explain to people, but it's utilities have purchased power on behalf of customers for years, and now the rates have come down, prices have come down in the market so low that when your load departs the utility, they can sell off that excess power. It's a traded commodity. It's not a waste. It goes back into the market, but because they paid so much for it and now they're selling it into a market where it's lower costs, it's that difference between what they contracted it for and what it's worth now is what the difference is. That's the fee that you're paying. It's not really an exit fee as we all kind of understand those. I hope that wasn't too wonky. So we tried to reframe them as above market costs, and the customers actually pay those directly to the utilities. Ours in California have been structured in a way over the years and manipulated in a way over several years that we tend to argue that they're not actually fair to customers. And there's a lot of creative financing opportunities to bring those costs down. And for a lot of reasons, that's an entirely different webinar. They haven't come down. So there's a lot of room for improvement, I guess would be one piece of advice. And two, because of that nature of the market for renewables is so low now, that even with those fees, customers are still paying competitive or lower rates than investor-owned utilities. So that's my other advice is don't let them become a big, scary boogeyman. They're actually manageable and they can be improved upon and calculated better. And then there's a lot of room for improvement there.
Yeah, and I think like you mentioned, Cody, there is writing in the current legislation in Colorado that attempts to address that. Lessons learned from California's experiences.
We're trying. Yeah, I mean, I will say that it is always nice when another state has experiences that you can draw upon and learn from, and that's definitely what we've been trying to do with regard to exit fees and other aspects of CCE. So we would be lucky to have what you have, but we can certainly learn and try to improve upon it.
Yeah, do better.
Thank you. Here's a question directed for Representative Brown. What are Xcel's concerns, if you've heard them?
Yeah, we've had conversations with Xcel. I think Xcel, at the end of the day, I think you can probably guess that they're an investor-owned utility, and the ability to do less business concerns them. I think on their, at least in our conversations with them, they're concerned about just having to continue to do the distribution, but the added complexity, not being able to sort of control where their power is coming from in any given community, losing their market share, right? So they buy so much power right now, they can demand certain prices. Certain communities go CCE, they buy less, and they're afraid that they're not going to be able to offer a product that is as price conscious. So it's definitely cutting into their business. They're a for-profit entity, and they want to get bigger and sell more stuff. So
here's another question for you, Representative Brown. How do we best get the facts to help drive the politics at the Capitol? Xcel plans to spend $11 billion on capital expenditures in Colorado in the next 5 years, dominated by expenditures on transmission, distribution, and, quote, natural gas. Xcel assumes their customers will pay off these massive expenditures with a profit for Xcel. I doubt that the constituents of legislators will be happy to pay these coming rate increases without any competition to provide price discipline.
I think it starts with these various stakeholder groups, to the extent to which, the unions or consumer groups or environmental groups are willing to really make this a priority and push for it, or at least not oppose it, that goes a long way. When I have some of our environmental champions, legislators who have really fought for climate action throughout their careers, expressing real concerns about this proposal, that's a problem. in terms of the politics. So, you know, it has to be about you know, making sure that the various groups who are, you know, strong players and loud voices at the Capitol have the right information, and that they're carrying that forward and communicating with legislators.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Let's see. We have a comment about the rebates for customers with rooftop solar. It says public service customers, Excel, used to pay into a RESA fund that used to go to residential rebates for customers with rooftop solar, but now almost no one uses the PSCo Solar Rewards Program. Benefits are low, application process clumsy, and most rooftop solar customers install without using any RESA-funded rebate program, relying on net metering and federal installation rebates. So just a comment about the rebate program. And another comment that the Colorado legislation does what Cody described. The IOU must sell its excess energy or assets at market rates, and if it doesn't cover the sunk cost and rebate in rate bates, then their difference is the exit fee. Let's see. Looks like we've covered most of the questions, if not all. Do any of you have any closing comments or questions for each other?
I just want to say thank you, Chris, Mary, everybody. I know I saw Leslie and Larry on here, so I have to give them a shout out because this is their baby too. And I wanted to just thank both Allison and Cody, both of you, for sharing your perspective. You all have been really fantastic, and you know, we can learn a lot in Colorado from your experiences. So thank you for spending an hour with us here and for helping me. I know it's been really educational for me too.
Right.
It's a hard fight. I really appreciate being here and your leadership, Representative Brown. I know, I can imagine the pressure, and so we appreciate you and happy to help any way I can.
Yeah, and thank you very much for inviting us on. Hopefully it was informative, and we're open to questions anytime offline.
So this has been wonderful. I just want to remind our audience that this recording will be up on the Empower Our Future website within a couple of days, along with the other recordings that the other Empower Hours, including the ones that Mary mentioned about CCE. Mary, do you have any closing remarks? Nope. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Take care
you.
all.
Good evening.